Let's get corrupted. What is up, everybody? It's Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. Guys, very sorry I missed last week. Sometimes it's hard to find guests sometimes, but you know what? It's all good. We keep this going, and I miss a week here and there, but it's really cool to have people that want to come on the show, and super thankful for you guys supporting. So hope you're all excited for this week's episode. As you see on screen, I have with me Kayla Martin of Infrared Reptiles. Going to be a great episode. I believe you are the second female breeder I've had on the show, which is really cool and a topic we wanted to talk about tonight. And I obviously just love seeing more colubrids, and also there's a ton of species on here that have not been covered on the show yet in 31 episodes. So I'm definitely excited to talk about them, and that's not necessarily from my ignorance, just a matter of who I can get on the show. But it's definitely going to be a fun one. So guys, as usual, just the kind of regular housekeeping stuff. I do have Meteoric Serpents t-shirts available. If anyone is interested in that, just hit me up and let me know, and I'd be happy to get one to you. Also, down below, you can see all my social media @. It's Meteoric Serpents everywhere. You could also go into the description and click on any of the links. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe while you're here. I really appreciate it. If you're listening to us on the podcast apps, which we're on all of them, you could go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the big name ones, and find us there. Please feel free to rate, review, and whatever on those platforms. I really appreciate it. It's been cool seeing the numbers. It seems I have a ton of international listeners, which is really interesting and very cool that people want to hear me and hear these guests talk. So that's super cool. So go check us out wherever you like to listen. I think the audio visual experience is a little more fun. It's a little more personable, but that's just me being biased to YouTube. So make sure you hit subscribe. We're chasing that 1,000 subscribers, so definitely go ahead and do that. Also, guys, make sure you are supporting USARK Florida. Those organizations are the ones protecting our rights to keep our reptiles as pets, as with our businesses and all of that. You never know what state's going to be hit next or what area. So you want to make sure you're supporting. The cheapest memberships for both of those organizations are extremely affordable. So if you've ever been on the fence about it, just go to the website, check it out, and definitely consider becoming a member. Also, guys, if you are looking to diversify your reptiles diet, definitely hit up Blake's Exotic Feeders on Instagram. That's the best frozen thawed quail around. I get it from him local, but he ships anywhere across the U.S. The Caternix quail, definitely been a great way for me to diversify my colubrids diet. I feed between the mice and the quail, so that's been really good. All my colubrids absolutely smash everything I give them. So, but it's definitely good. If you are interested in that, send him a message. You can hit me up for the price list if you want to, but again, he ships everywhere. Let him know that Joe from Meteoric Serpent sent you, and he'd be happy to hook you up on the shipping price as well, because I know it could be expensive. Let's see here. Also, another topic that we'll probably talk about tonight is Colubrid Fest. Colubrid Fest, the 3-day event at the end of September at the Indiana Convention Center, presented by the Show Me Reptiles show and the guys over at Colubrid and Colubroid Radio, Zach and Clint. Guys, this is going to be the next biggest thing, the biggest, colubrid only get together that's going to be happening every year. I'm extremely excited. Kayla's going to be vending. I might be vending. I don't know if I should give that away. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out the details and me getting there with all my stuff and my animals efficiently. I'm going to be there. So if you want to meet me there, I'd love to meet all of you for sure. So make sure you go check it out. Look it up on Show Me Reptiles website and whatnot. And definitely stay tuned to what's coming with that. And last but not least, before we get started, the first link in the description, goes to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. If you're interested in showing some extra support to me, you want to say thanks for the show, I really appreciate it. It's also a way to connect with some other reptile enthusiasts. Got a few members in there. We talk a bit, have some fun little banter. You get behind the scenes of what goes on here in my collection as well. I kind of tell the Patreon what happens in my collection before I tell anyone else. Unfortunately, I just suffered a death in my collection, which sucks. My original bamboo rat snake, OP Coxeye, passed away unexpectedly out of nowhere. I got home from work a week ago today. We're recording this on Friday, by the way. This is not live. I should have prefaced with that. But yeah, and she was acting super weird. Picked her up and she was very, very limp, and she basically died in my hands, and that was sad. And I raised her from a hatchling, 2020 baby. No clue what happened. I brought her to a vet. He examined her, saw nothing out of the ordinary. So that made me feel better, at least, that there was nothing, crazy going on. I am monitoring the rest of the collection pretty closely, but shit happens when you're dealing with live animals. So I guess it is what it is, unfortunately. But yeah. And on a brighter note, sorry, I kind of just killed the vibe. But let us welcome our guests. Thank you very much for being here. What is up, Kayla? How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. All right. Yeah, so kind of just as we get started, what I like to do with everyone, if you can kind of give your background of how you got into the reptiles and kind of how that segued into where you are today with your collection.
I've been keeping for a long time. I got my first snake, of course, the ball python, when I was 6. Had that for most of my childhood, and then started heavily keeping as a teenager.
Okay.
And I haven't stopped.
Yeah, that's how it usually goes.
Yeah. But I've always been a colubrid person. When I was younger, I dabbled in tegus and a couple boas, but it never dove into them with the morphs or breeding or anything. That it's always just been the colubrids, and then primarily focusing on the Honduran milks.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, and we kind of beforehand talked about your collection, and that's the bulk of it. And then you have a bunch of other stuff scattered in groups, which I think is a very cool plan of yours, and we're definitely going to talk about it. The way you kind of keep it is the Hondurans are your main thing, and then you have 1.2s or 2.2s of pretty much everything else. I think it's a good strategy, good way to go about it, of maximizing what you want to keep and breed and be efficient with it.
Yeah, I've got probably, I've lost count now, but over 30 Honduran milks.
Okay.
And then the rest are a lot of the African rear fang unique ones.
Yeah. It's super interesting. That's a pretty big difference there. But we're gonna kind of get all into it. So I obviously wanted to start off with your staple. And I'm sure we'll have a pretty long, drawn out conversation about this. But Honduran milk snakes, I have yet to have any milk snake talk on this show, and I've been waiting for it. And you came up, and I was like, what happens is that I hear someone else on CCR, and I'm like, well, I don't want to bring them on right after they were on there, because that kind of it's the same conversation, way too close. And it was long enough for you, and I was like, okay, I could bring Kayla on now. But yeah, glad I could, because your Honduran projects are super, super cool. And it seems you have a lot of, I don't know whether it's morphs and other line bred things that I've just never seen with a lot of them.
Yeah, that's what I try, and I like the line bred traits and the lineages versus just the color morphs.
Very cool. So let's kind of break down that project and what you're working with in there, because just in my limited scope of Honduran milk snakes, I mean, I know kind of the basics. There's albino, there's anery, there's a hypomorph. And those are the ones I know that are at least just mutations, like recessive mutations. And then what kind of else is out there?
Well, see, that's why I like the Hondurans, is because it's not that complicated. I can't follow the hognose and the corn snakes and the ball python. That I get lost. So that's where I started with the Hondurans. Was like, okay, cool. There's like 4 or 5 mutations to where I can keep track of it.
Okay.
And so it was like, the albino, the anery, the hypo, and then there's a couple like 2 gene combos of, ghost and
Right.
and the snows, and then the 3 gene, which is the pearls. But it's all pretty straightforward. And then there's a couple pattern mutations, or lines. And that's just whether it's the vanishing pattern, which is where the bands are slightly reduced,
Okay.
or there's the aberrant patterning. Now that there's what's being called a reverse, which is just like whiter bands, and it's mostly on the albinos.
Okay.
Then there's some sock heads popping up. I really like the sock heads. You see that a
Interesting.
lot in Pueblans. But I really like it when it comes up in the Hondurans. So I've got quite a few of those.
Very nice.
But the different lines are mostly, like, the named lineages are mostly in terms of the pattern, and not so much the recessive genes. It's the pattern of being aberrant or vanishing pattern. You'll hear like Norm Dam, which is known for his aberrant albino line. There's the Falcon line, which has the vanishing pattern ghosts. TSK, which is the black line. That's what I'm really excited for. I'm focusing on that one right now.
Cool.
That one's got a lot of attention online because they are Hondurans, but they don't look like the average Honduran.
Right.
So that's been my main excitement for this season, is producing those. And that's just an aberrant high black animal. And I
Okay.
personally, I like the darker animals. So I've been working on some really dark aneries, some just regular bicolor tangerines, just focusing in line breeding for the darker pigmented animals. But you name it, I have it. I still produce the albinos, and then just the regular hypos, and I've pretty much got almost every line out there.
Okay.
I think I'm missing a few, but I definitely have every morph.
Okay. Very cool. I'm trying to scroll through your Instagram right now and find one of those black line, the TSK. Where do you think? I'll
There's
share
a
my
photo
screen.
of them on my story right now.
Okay. Let's see if I can view your story. Might not let me. Oh,
There you go.
it did. Okay. Yeah, now that's cool.
So
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, so it basically makes them black and orange and like totally strips away. It's almost as if like red was never there. Like, I mean, those are super orange
Right, and
animals.
that's the tangerine version of them, but they do come with the black
Okay.
and the yellow, which would be a tricolor.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's super cool. Like I was telling you yesterday, I mean, and I talk about it all the time. My limited hands-on experience with Honduran milks was at my old pet store job, and we used to breed them quite a bit. Some albinos and aneries and hypos and stuff like that. And that was always really fun. And it was one of the species that I really enjoyed taking care of there, just because they were such cool babies, and especially as adults, like those are such they're like such majestic colubrids. Like they're this big animal because like they get pretty long, like bigger than your average corn snake, obviously. And it was just a species I really enjoyed taking care of there. And like I kind of led those breeding projects and making sure those eggs were good. So it was a fun experience taking care of them.
Yeah. And I want to preface by saying, and this is one of those things that I left out in the CCR episode that I'm like, I should have put that in there. But I refer to them as, in this setting, it's like, okay, Honduran milks. But they're truly a more accurate name for them should be Hobbydern, is what people refer to them as.
Okay.
Back in the day, things got brought in under the name Honduran milks, and they weren't truly the Honduran milks. They got
Okay.
mixed in with a bunch of other species. But what is in the community today being labeled Honduran milks, they're all mixed to some degree. Not the same mixture of like where you see the Imperials, where it's like a Pueblan and a corn snake and a king snake and a
Right.
Honduran, it's not a hybrid or a mix like that. They're just not pure locality, straight from Honduras, Honduran milk snakes.
Okay.
If there are pure ones out there, which there are, they're in a collection and they're being labeled as pure with the locale. There are a handful of people that have them. They're very like, this is pure, this is a Honduran, it is not a Hobbydern. So there's always that kind of little debate and controversy online of people saying, oh, this is my Honduran milk. And it's like, well, yeah, to the industry standards, it is. But to diehard locale people, the purists, no, it's not.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
on a lot of the Facebook groups, you'll see, oh, what is this? And people are like, oh, it's a Honduran milk. And then someone will pop in, no, it's not. And it's like, that's a hybrid. And it's like, yes, but there's a little bit more of an explanation of, yes, you have a Honduran milk, you have a Hobbydern, but you do not have like a straight up hybrid where it's crossed with, corn snake and king snake, because there are those that exist as well.
Right.
Those are all different.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because, and maybe this is my ignorance, and I don't know when it comes into some of the more complex animals that you have. I like if you put in front of me like different milk snakes, the different ones, even just the normal types, I'm pretty confident I could pick out a Honduran by sight, and I'm very familiar with how they look. I feel like their head shape and the way the colors are just a little bit different than the other ones, enough so that I can tell them apart. So it's interesting because even I feel like the ones that you might be referring to as Hobbydurans, I would like, blindly pick them out as a Honduran.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I mean, to the average person that looks up, like you get on Morph Market right now, or you're flipping through a book and it says Honduran milk snake, they're all Hobbydurans because and so basically you Google Honduran milk snake or you search it on Facebook groups, everything you see is going to be a Hobbydurran. That is the norm for the industry, except for the people that have straight from Honduras where they've imported them in, where they know what they have, or it's been, they're able to trace them back to the locale, and then they don't mix those lines in with the Hobbydurans. So they keep them separate. Visually, they kind of look the same. But if you have a true Honduran milk, you're gonna know because they are not listed without that title. The purists will be like, no, this is not a Hobbydurran. So you won't find. So basically, you get on Morph Market, everything on Morph Market you see is going to be a Hobbydurran.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, and I mean it's come down to that in I feel like quite a few colubrid species where there is kind of mixed blood in there. But like, how does that make you feel working with the species? Because I assume you kind of don't care because you're still pushing these, complex lineages and stuff. So
yeah, I don't keep anything that is pure as far as being the locale true Hondurans. Everything I have is the Hobbydurans. If it is a morph, it is a Hobbydurran. That's like plain and simple. If it's got heads, if it's a morph, it's a Hobbydurran because the original albinos were not Hondurans.
Got
but
it.
they got mixed in to create a Honduran albino. Um, so just a little bit of tidbit that some people argue about it online and they
Yeah.
get confused on what that is, and that also goes. It wraps into what I wanted to explain about the black line. Um, there with the black line, it was originally I got my breeders from TSK, the Snake Keeper,
Okay.
and I was able to directly trace it back from where they got their original animals, and then where those original animals, and I traced it all the way back as far as I could. There's only like 3 or 4 people that had this line, um, so it hasn't been outcrossed that much.
Okay.
And so when TSK stopped working with the line, myself and David Deem kind of took over, and we wanted to rebrand it. So David came up with the name Ash and Ember, and
Okay.
the ash referring to the tricolors and the ember referring to the tangerines.
Got
Um,
it.
but we've gotten a little bit of heat from that because there is an ember hybrid where it's a Cal King and a Honduran. They don't look the same. And so when him or I or someone else reposts the black line, uh, there's a couple people are like, "That's a hybrid." I'm like, "No, no, 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 totally different, not related to the embers." So
Yeah.
I still when I post them, I say TSK black line, just because
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid the confusion. But just to clear the air on that one, they are as far back as we could go, they are Hondurans. They have never been crossed into a cow king or anything else that
Okay.
like that.
It kind of sucks that some of those hybrid animals were given like a name like that. Because then it does create confusion, and I'm sure you guys obviously didn't do that intentionally. Like even like uh the super cross ones that you mentioned, like the Imperials, like I don't even know why are they called that. It doesn't make sense to me. It's like just call them what they are. Just say it, hey, it's quarter this, quarter that, and
Mhm.
the other two, Um yeah, it definitely makes it a little bit confusing. I think the unsuspecting person, the average pet buyer that really doesn't know a whole lot would buy that animal not knowing any better.
Yeah, and that's with my the TSK black line is I definitely want a name to stay with the animals because there are so few of them out there,
Yeah.
and really just like me and David, and I think Chad Gordon has one pairing, and then one other guy has a male, I believe. There's really not that many out there, and if they get sold and lose their name attached to them, then how do we keep that animal what it is? I mean, you can only do so much, but I try and keep the name with them.
Yeah, and I see it a whole lot on the ball python side of the industry because I'm into that too. And with the naming and all that stuff, there's multiple genes that are the same thing, and then some people try to rename things, and then it causes a whole controversy. But that's neither here nor there. But I get what you're saying, at least.
Yep.
Yeah. And then in terms of some of those, like those line bred projects, are you trying to like cross some of them together? Or are you trying to make better examples? Like what's kind of the goal there? And then also mixing in the mutations, unless you are not doing that. But
So it depends on what it is. I have Sanders line aberrants, and I have one male and I have like 2 females. And so I'll do Sanders to Sanders to keep pure Sanders, and then I'll outcross a little bit. Um, and that goes with the other, like I have crazy line aberrants, and I have found that the they don't reach the potential of adult size. They're pretty small animals, um, and so I think that they've just been so line bred that they need to be outcrossed a little bit just to get some
okay.
new breed in there. So this year I did To my crazy line male, I put just a regular albino tangerine, just to see what happens. Um,
Right.
and and the good thing about the crazy line is that in comparison to some of the other aberrant lineages out there, the crazy line has a high probability of giving you visual aberrant offspring, where some of the other lineages, it's you're lucky if you get a visual. Um,
Okay.
and so the crazy line, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to you know do a project of seeing if I can do in aberrant albino, with mixing the crazy line in. But then that those babies should technically be labeled, crazy line outcross, not straight
Right.
crazy line.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then also you mentioned the tangerine, and remind me what that is, because it kind of just enhances like the orange coloration, correct?
So a true tangerine is going to be, as an adult, is going to be bicolor,
Okay.
whether it is orange and black or red and black. Um, but it's a bicolor. So instead of that inner triad band being a slightly different shade of orange or red, it should be the same color as the outer band.
Okay.
And that's
Interesting.
where people they think, oh, tangerine, it's an orange animal. Well, no, not really. It could be red, but it's still a tangerine. It's
Okay.
more of the focus on it being bicolor.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And so I don't know, is it by chance any form of like axanthism because it's lacking that yellow banding, or
Yeah,
not really because there's still
it's
orange,
considered
so I guess
normal.
there's yellow. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so normal wild types are either tangerine or they're a tricolor. Tricolor just
Gotcha.
means that it's more of a yellow or a peachy orange or just something making that the inner band a third color. But it's still
Okay,
considered normal.
gotcha. Interesting. All right, cool. Um, let's see. Oh, and then, with 30 plus animals, I'm sure you're producing a whole lot. So what's that kind of breeding group looking like? Are you putting, like how much are you willing to stud out a male, or like what are kind of your breeding groups within that
Uh,
that big
so
group?
most of mine are just one-to-one pairing. I think I
Okay.
have a couple where I put a male to two females. I try not to stretch them out too much. I feel like it affects their fertility a little bit. Um,
Gotcha.
and this year is the year that I have way more than prior years. Just had quite a few first year females that finally come to age, and a couple new projects. I've kind of switched things around a little bit, kind of downsized on the more like regular animals and tried to focus on the higher end. Um,
Okay.
but I've got a mixture of both at this point. But yeah, I needed to get a second incubator going and a second hatchling rack this year, and uh,
Okay.
so it'll be fun messing with a lot more babies this year.
Yeah, for sure. And you had mentioned, some of your females reaching maturity. What is that age that you find them to be like that's the sweet spot for letting them start their first year? Because I know there are animals that like specifically their species, like, they don't grow a huge amount in the first year and even the second year, and they get a pretty impressive size. So I assume they're one that's you probably want to wait a little bit longer on,
Yeah.
compared to like corn snakes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it seems like if you so the magical number that people say is 3 years and 300 grams. Um,
Okay.
I I try to get those, even if that means I'm waiting to 4, sometimes 5 years. Get the females bigger. Um,
Yeah.
I have found that if they're at 3 years, or 300 grams or whatever, you have a lot more probability of egg binding, or you get small clutches, or you get, some infertiles. I and also it's like if you breed them that first year that they're technically of size, you see their growth rate just kind of come to a stall where
Yeah.
they just do not get to their full full potential as quickly or at all if they're bred too early, especially with the hondos. I mean, I try and let them get bigger, but with how many there are and in the mixed lines that are out there and the mixed blood, some of them do not get to the same size. I have some
Okay.
ghosts that she's 7 8 years old, she's done growing, but she's half the size of my snow, and so
Right.
a lot of it just depends on their genetics.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, and I thought you were gonna say the 4 to 5 years because that's what I was kind of thinking in my head as a pretty solid sweet spot. And I've noticed it too, even with animals like the Texas rats. These females that you let them get up there to that 4 or 5 years old before first breeding. They're a good sized female.
Yeah, and I've had 2-year-old females that are plenty big enough to breed, but I held off. Give her not
Okay.
another year. It's just better for the animal.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Cool. Let's see. And then even if you want to highlight some of like the breeding process and I guess maybe incubation, we've kind of gone over brumation. I assume you put your animals through some form of a cool down.
Nope.
Oh no, not at all.
No, not at all. But I in the last 6 months, I think I'm gonna change it.
Okay.
When I first started breeding, I did the typical cool down once or twice, and just I was living in a different house, and I had to have I moved my racks into the garage, and they were getting too cold, and then so I struggled with finding that happy medium of temperature. Um,
Okay.
and so I was like, you know what, this is complicated. I'm not going to do it. They're all Hondas. They don't technically need it. So for the last 7 or so years, I have not brumated. But I'm also in California. I get very mild winters.
Right.
Um, and they I'm late. Like I've kind of just like sat back and kind of like compared my timeline of right now I'm still getting like I still have some females that are just now going into their pre-lay shed,
Oh
where there's
wow.
other people that do brumate and they already have having babies hatch. And
Okay.
so I haven't quite decided as is that good? Is it beneficial to be late for sales wise? Or not? But I feel like maybe I'll brumate, maybe make it an experiment. Maybe brumate half of them this upcoming winter and see if it changes the timeline. That way I can have more
Okay.
standard clutches.
Interesting. And even without brumation, are you still finding like most success, no real like slugs, like getting all females to go and
No,
stuff?
I haven't had any issues. Um, this
Okay.
year I did have it's actually the female that's in the cover photo of the one that I
Okay.
sent you the
Yeah,
other day.
yeah.
That female, she did not lay for me this year.
Okay.
And she's always been great, and I keep my pairings together most of the year, so I don't always witness the copulation, but she didn't lay at all, and I'm like, "Okay, what's going on with you, girl?" And but she's also my biggest female, and so, you know, she could probably I got her as an adult, um, so she was a little chubby, so I'm thinking she
Gotcha.
needs to go on a diet, and maybe that had something to do with
Okay.
her not laying. Um, but yeah, they don't always go. But the ones that do, I've never had, knock on wood, have not had any real slugs.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Very nice. Um, and then even like babies, like how many, I mean, with that many pairings, excuse me, how many are you like pumping out per year?
Right now, I counted. Right now, I have 87 eggs, Honduran
Okay.
eggs, in the incubator, and I still have I have 8 more females I need to lay.
Oh wow. Okay. And what are
But
you seeing? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, but the average clutch for Hondurans is not huge. It's not like corn snakes or yeah, it's
That was
I
my
think
next
my
question.
average is like 5 to 6 eggs.
Okay.
I'm happy. I'm like really excited if I get like a 10 clutch. I got 1 8 clutch this year. Um,
Yeah.
but then there are people out there that get like, 9 or 10 eggs, and
Oh, wow.
the biggest females, they don't do that for me. So I don't know what it is, but uh, average for me is 5 to 7.
Yeah, because I was gonna say the one thing I do remember is like the milk snake eggs are these huge long eggs,
Yeah.
and you get like you're lucky you get like 6 of them, and like yeah, that's a successful clutch, you know?
Yeah. Personally, I would rather have a big egg and a big healthy baby than a bunch of little tiny babies that don't want to eat.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. No, that's cool. Um, all right, awesome. Uh, anything else you want to cover on the Hondurans before we move on? Anything I kind of missed?
I think you covered most of it.
Okay, cool. And just sticking with the milk snakes, you did mention you had a pair of Pueblans. I know I saw those on your Instagram as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. So that one, so it's a Halloween, and then an Oreo. And the Oreo is basically just the Oreo and Halloween morphs are to eliminate that red out of them, to make it a bicolor animal. Which again, my personal preference is I like the darker animals and I like the bicolor animals.
Okay.
So I breed and keep what I am personally attracted to, not necessarily
Yeah.
what's in or popular. Um,
Yeah.
I want to like what I'm working with. So the Oreo and the Halloween uh, lacks the red banding, so it turns it into a bicolor animal. The Halloween would basically be the apricot version, where it has like that peachy color or the apricot color with the black banding, and then the Oreo is what would be a normal, I guess, more of the non apricot look.
Okay.
So it's where it's more of a, I guess, in my guy, he's more of a like a light gray and black.
Okay. Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah. When it comes to the milk snakes, I don't know what it is for me, just personally. Like the Hondurans always struck me more than any of the other species. Um, I do like some of the other ones, like I think some of the North American milk snakes are kind of cool looking. Like I see what David posts, David Deem, like some of those are pretty cool. But when it comes to like the morphs and working with all the stuff like that, I'm definitely I'm biased because that's what I worked with, but I'm definitely partial to Hondurans. But that's just me.
Yeah, I like, and there's the size too. It makes
Yeah.
them easy.
Yep.
Even though despite being as big as they are, they're still flighty and they still poop on you. But
Yep.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm
I
the same way. I don't really have any interest in the North American milks.
Yeah.
They just they don't appeal to me.
Gotcha. Yeah, and the one thing I always comment with the with any baby milk snake, they're super squirmy, like they're super spazzy, like they just like fly all over the place and they want to poop on you. But once they kind of hit that year, 2 years old and they start to calm down, and then once they get to that adult size, like they're such an impressive snake, even to hold around you or just in your hands and stuff. It's just, awesome animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Now to kind of move on to some of your other projects. I know you specifically wanted to highlight your 3 Madagascar Hognose species. So, if you want to go one by one with those, please do. Cuz I know it's a 1.2 group of each, right, that you're keeping,
I have a
I think.
couple more than that, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, a lot of them are in trios, or I have
Gotcha.
2 pairs. But um, yeah, I mean, I to this date, I have not successfully produced them. Um,
Okay.
but I have been keeping them for many, many years. I got my first Madagascar giant in 2009. Um, and for the longest time I kept things, but I didn't have an interest in breeding them.
Okay.
I wanted to keep them. I was on the keeper side of things, and I wanted to learn their behavior and really know the species before I decided if I was going to work with it on a breeding level. Um, and I I kept the I got my first giant in 2009, and then shortly after that had blondes and then speckleds. Um, and I've kept those three species on and off since then. But now I'm like buckled down. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get some captive bred babies out of these. Um,
Okay.
and a lot of people are now starting to produce the giants. I months ago I had my pair. They were not shy about breeding. They it seemed like they were always breeding. Um,
Okay.
and for whatever reason, I don't know if I'm getting eggs. I would have thought it's like they bred for like 2 months, and then she went into shed, and I'm like, okay, it's a pre-lay shed, and then nothing
Yeah.
happened. And then she swelled up. I'm like, okay, it was not a pre-lay shed. And then she went into shed again, and I'm like, okay, now it's a pre-lay shed. And she was still eating, and I'm like, what is going on? Uh,
Yeah.
and she shed probably 4.5 weeks ago now, and she ate 2 weeks ago. Now she's not eating, and she's throwing me for a loop. I'm like, are you gravid? Or are you not gravid? Um, so I don't know what's going on with her. We'll see. Uh,
Okay.
my my blondes, I have a trio of blondes, and I've talked with Owen and and a couple other people that have produced the blondes, and they're just super secretive. And it's like,
Okay.
yeah, I know you're gravid. Where's the eggs? And it's they from what I've discovered, or my opinion on it, is that they tend to breed, and then there's like a longer timeline between from what I'm used to with the Lamprey peltis and the milks.
Okay.
Like breed a couple weeks, shed 2 weeks,
Yeah.
eggs, and with the Leah Heterodon, it's not working out that way. Um, so I am like 95% sure, and I'm probably gonna jinx it, that my blonde is gravid, which would be super exciting. I personally would love to produce blondes or the speckleds over the giants, just
Okay.
because there are several people out there working with the giants right now. They're being
Yeah.
produced, which is great. Um, but I wanna focus on the ones that are not being produced as commonly. So
Yeah.
that'd be blondes or the speckleds, especially the speckleds. I did witness copulation on my speckleds. That's kind of out of the three species been my they're my favorite. Um, and I've kept many of them throughout the last 10-12 years, and they're harder to come by. They're found in the more southern region of Madagascar, and for whatever reason, they're not collected as often, or as in the same numbers as the giants or the blondes do. Um,
Okay.
so you don't see them as often, and it's kind of a mystery of they come in, they look great, they're feeding great, and then they slowly drop. It's like within a year, 2 year, 1 to 2 years after being imported, they just they don't they don't thrive. So
Okay.
I've went through quite a few, and that's even with
Oh wow.
you know you know parasite treatment. They're eating, they look good, and then just all of a sudden they crash. And
So
that's
even now, do you still have all wild caught animals
so
on the speckleds?
I have long-term captives. So
Okay. Sorry.
they're
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So the pair that I have now have been captive for about three or so years. Um,
Okay.
and I'm fairly confident they're good to go. I think that if they were gonna die on me, they would have already. Um, and those are the ones that it was funny. I was looking for the speckleds for a long time, and I was holding out. I was like, I either want to find some captive breds which occasionally, like Matthew Dove, he had some. I was talking to a guy in Canada. He had a clutch. I was holding out for some captive bred or long-term captive adults, and I did not want to deal with getting a big group of imports and then just losing them again because I'd done that
Right.
before. So a friend on Facebook, she was like, "Hey, I've had these speckleds. I've been keeping them together for like a couple years. Nothing's happened. I'm gonna pass the project on to you." I'm like, "Yes, I want them. I'll take them." And shit, you not, the day I unpacked them from FedEx, put them in the enclosure and they bred. And I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna hate this." And she's like, "Oh yeah, I hate that." I was like, "I'm sorry."
Okay.
um, but usually it's just switch it up from. Um,
Yeah. It's like
yeah,
that sometimes.
sometimes the change of environment just triggers it. And in my opinion, it's space too. Um, I I have not to say that it's not been done because there are people that are breeding them while keeping them in rack systems. But my belief that I stand by is that they need large enclosures to be successfully bred. And I don't know if that is because maybe the male needs to be able to chase the female, because they are not nice. Like
Okay.
they are aggressive breeders. Um,
Okay.
so I think maybe the trick to that is just offering them larger spaces.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. Well, hopefully, we record this and then in a few weeks, I mean, let's hope. Let's
Yeah,
cross our fingers for, all three of the species.
yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But
No,
then
that's very
getting the babies to eat is another challenge, especially
Yeah, so
especially
what's
blondes.
okay. So what's that like now? Because I know sometimes even like, your standard Western hogs can be quite picky out of the egg. So what about these guys, especially coming from Madagascar?
The giants seem to be pretty easy. They start feeding pretty reliably.
Okay.
Occasionally people will have a stubborn one. But when it comes to the blondes and the speckleds, that's where people can be a little bit more challenged. Some come out and they're like, "Feed me, I want to live," and the other ones just doesn't matter what trick in the book you try. They're like, "Nope, I'm dying." Um,
Okay.
and so it's like there's all the tricks of you can get scents from frog and toad and fish, and or you can offer little frog leg pieces or fish pieces. And with all of mine, I offer even my adults. I mean, they would live on rodents, no problem. They're not picky
Right.
eaters, but I offer a variety. So it's like I've people see my plates that I give them, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, I've got fish on there, I've got quail, I've got rodents. Um, I do a lot of small meals, um,
Okay.
small items, I should say, small items. And I house them all together. They're all communal. Um, all
Interesting.
my giants are in one cage, all my speckleds, all my in pairings or trios.
Okay.
And you have to know your animals. Like my giants, I do have to shoo my male to the other side of the cage and make sure my female can eat, because
Yeah.
he'll steal from her. But my blondes and my speckleds, they sit around that plate and just eat happily together. There's no issue.
Okay.
But it's about
Cool.
knowing your animals because what I experience might not be what you experience.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's risky, the old cohab feeding regimen. I know, and you always have to watch because you're never sure, and you gotta hope they kind of eat at the same time, or like you just have them at separate corners of either the rack or enclosure, whatever it may be. But yeah,
Yep.
cool. All right. Yeah. So like I said, I mean, hopefully we cross our fingers and you get some eggs for those guys because that would obviously be very cool.
Yeah, that's I would love to be successful in getting those, especially after me keeping the species for so long. It's kind of been like, okay,
Yeah.
it's time. I wanna say that I've done it.
Yup. Definitely. All right. Awesome. And then speaking of eggs and babies, another species I wanted to highlight today because you just had them hatch, Gonyosoma porcinum or carulium. Is that how you
I
pronounce
don't
it?
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
Persida. We'll stick with
what's
that.
currently Gonyosoma porcinum or the green bush rat snakes. You just had eggs hatch, which is very, very cool. I'm
Yeah.
definitely a fan of Gonyosoma, with me keeping a couple rhinos here. But yeah, definitely highlight those guys.
So that was this first time working with these, and I was totally nervous. Um, I had talked to a couple people in Europe, and I talked to Clint, and like, okay, what temperature do you incubate at? And I kind of got like, one guy said 80, and then Clint said like 74, 75. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna go in the middle. I'm gonna do 77. Um, my house is hot, so halfway through the incubation, I was getting spikes into the 80s. I'm like, "No!" So I put my eggs literally in a crawl space underneath my stairs to keep them cool.
Okay.
And everyone else was like, "Oh, well, they start to hatch around day 70." And I know some of the other Gonyosomos, they go in higher numbers, but the average of what I was finding was, day 70, 75 or so, and I'm ticking into the 80s, and I'm like, "Oh no, the heat spikes, they're all gonna be kinked, they're not gonna come out." Yeah, and I was worried, and so it's like the other night, I was up at night, and I'm like reading through files online, seeing what day everyone else was hatching their babies at, and I'm like, "It's 88 days. They should be out now." So I came
Yeah.
down the stairs literally with a scalpel in my hand, and I was gonna cut the egg. I was gonna sacrifice one egg to see if the baby was still alive, see what was going on. And I opened the incubator and one's pipped. And I'm like, okay.
Okay.
I was like, they're like, hold up, I'm ready. Um,
Yeah.
and I had 4 eggs and 4 babies, and they're perfect. They're not kinked. They're spicy
Awesome.
little things. Um, so that was super exciting. And I'm probably gonna at least hold back a pair, if not a trio. But my female is uh, she's like in her prelay shed again, so she's double clutching. And I was like, well, that's
Oh,
cool. So I'll have
okay.
more later after I decide which ones of these I'm keeping. Um,
Okay. Very
but
nice.
yeah, I have 2 adult females. I have the one that laid and the one that she's double clutching, and then I had another female, and she egg bound on me, and
Oh,
she's
man.
hanging in there. She egg bound the entire clutch. Um, and they're just massive eggs. And I tried to aspirate, nothing.
Really?
Yeah, but she's eating. So, and I'm like, are you gonna pass these? Are you just gonna spit out mummified eggs next year, or is she gonna
Oof.
slowly die? Because the aspiration didn't take any yolk out. They're already hardened. Um, but she's eating, so I mean that's a good sign. So fingers
Okay.
crossed it pulls through. But it just sucks to lose an adult female when
Yeah,
really not that many out there.
definitely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, because I like rhinos and want to explore more, it's definitely a species I'd be interested in keeping in the future. Um, Yeah, I mean, green snakes are just cool. That's all I could really say.
Yeah.
Then, they seem just fun to keep because I know, if you give them caging, good lighting, and all that stuff, like they're gonna be super active snakes that you see all the time. And so, what's your style of husbandry for your adults? What are you doing?
So I have the trio in a 4-foot cage,
Okay.
loaded with branches, live plants, cork tubes. Um, they have UV, but I keep them at room temperature. But I'm warm where I'm at. Um, and I did not brumate these. They were fine. I think maybe just the natural temperature drop. In the summer, my house is hot, and the winter, my house is cold. So I think
Okay.
just keeping them at room temperature was enough to do its job.
Gotcha.
But they're always out. I mean, they hang out in the cork tubes, but then they come out and they cruise around. They're a great display snake. I have them in my living room, so I get to
Okay.
stare at them all day long. I work from home, so this is what I do. So it's like I get to see them,
There you go.
which is awesome. And It's a green snake with blue eyes. I mean, the blue eyes is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, it's always cool to hatch a new species, something to, check that box off the list, right?
Yeah, I've had quite a few new species for me this season. So I had a clutch of African file snakes a couple months
Yes, I
ago.
did I did see that. Yep, that's cool.
Yeah. And then my Egyptian false cobras, I got eggs from them. So fingers crossed that pulls through.
Yeah. Cool. The Egyptian false cobras was my next topic because I know you wanted to talk about those guys too. So perfect segue there. So you did get eggs from those, but talk about the species a little bit because I remember from your CCR episode, they're definitely interesting in terms of how they're kept and what you do for their environment. So just go ahead with that species.
Well, I keep them a little different than I have more respect for the species of I treat them like hots. I don't like being bit. I don't want to be bit.
Yeah.
And you see all these big importers. I won't name names, but they say, "Oh, look," they're very oftenly imported. They're a relatively cheaper animal, and they're like, "Oh, look, they're harmless. They're rear fanged. It's like a hognose." No, it's not like a hognose. But the species needs it very, very hot temperatures. I bask mine at like 125. Sometimes it gets a little hotter than that. Um,
Yeah.
and when they are properly heated, they are not nice. They will bite you. So the people that are holding their animals, it makes you wonder, is that a cold animal?
Right.
Because not only are they're rear fanged, but it's not like a hognose that has to actually chew on you. Their fangs are more centralized in their mouth, like right below
Okay.
their eye, and they're larger and they're pretty mobile. So I mean, a swipe can get you. Um, and mine are not nice. If I have to reach in for their water or to rearrange something in there, I use a hook. I do not
Okay.
use. Um, there has been people that have been bit and they are vomiting and shitting themselves and having the fevers and the chills and the swelling. And one, I just don't want to experience that. And two, I don't keep them to hold them. I don't
Yeah.
hold majority of what I have. That's just I don't get interested in. I like observing their natural behavior. Uh, and that's also why I enjoy keeping them in the big natural setups to where I can watch them periscope, I can watch them build their dens. Um,
Right.
and especially with them being a fairly communal species, seeing how they interact with each other. I mean, especially the Egyptian false cobras, they have really cool behaviors with each other that keeping them together in the large spaces, I get to see that. Whereas if you had one animal, you'd have no idea that the species does that. And that's
I'm trying to pull up a photo of the enclosure just because, by the way, there's gonna be a link to Kayla's Instagram in the description. So if you haven't followed her already, go do that. But I mean your enclosure designing is just so cool. It's this, right? This is the one? Yeah.
yeah, that's the video of them breeding. Um, you can see the male does his little twitchy dance.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
no,
it's
even that, I mean, just that environment you've created is just so interesting and cool. And I mean, obviously, I keep my stuff in racks and I really don't have shame in that, but like what your setups are like, it puts my entire husbandry to shame. And I have no problem saying that. But yeah, it's just super cool that you're willing to do that for these animals. And you kind of answered a question I was going to ask, which was, you know, what is it for you that like if you don't want to hold them, what makes that an interest to you? And you kind of said it, it's watching the behavior, seeing all the stuff that they do naturally. So,
and that goes
overall.
with all of my Hondurans are in racks. I once upon
Yeah.
a time I kept them in nice enclosures. They didn't use the space. I didn't ever see them. They're in racks. They're happy in racks. I still make it cool inside their tubs and give them some things to crawl on and whatnot. But the big display enclosures that I have are for the more unique animals. And I have a lot of African species, and they're very
Okay.
visually oriented. They're very active. They're diurnal. They bask. They need the UV. They are always out and about, and so I get to see them. Um, and that enclosure there, that's 6 foot long by 3 feet deep by 18 tall. And I've got several inches of substrate. I've got tons of den sites with cork barks and cork tubes and caves. There's 3 separate basking spots, and it's very cool. They're an awesome species of where they sweep the sand with their neck to build dens, and it was really cool watching the male build a den for the female,
Oh wow.
which is a characteristic that species does. And they have a lot of really cool social behaviors, and I get to see that with having them on display in an enclosure versus in a tub.
Yeah. Awesome. Um yeah, and that kind of led into my next topic, and we can perhaps get right into that. Was, I wanted to talk about the rack versus cage thing, because you do, and you openly showed, the way your entire collection is set up yesterday in pictures on your story or on a post or whatever. But you do both. But I definitely appreciate how you do your caging, because you have these large naturalistic cages. You mentioned live plants before, so are those bioactive as well, or you just kind of you do
Um,
the live plant?
they're half-ass bioactive.
Okay.
I live on 10 acres, and I have the luxury of going outside and grabbing wood and grass and whatever else I can find and chucking it in my enclosures. I don't sanitize. I do have the little isopods and springtails and whatever else
Okay.
comes in from leaf litter and logs and whatnot. But I do not I'm not one to go out and buy isopods and cleaning crews and add it to that way. It's just whatever comes in on its own, and
Okay.
I still spot clean. So it's I guess technically bioactive, but it's not a managed bioactive enclosure.
Got it.
I do have live plants in there, um, and there's grow lights in addition to my basking lights. All my lights are off right now because there's a glare on the screen, and it's hot up here, so everything's dark. But traditionally, all those cages are really well lit, with the live plants growing in it. And aside from right now, because again, it's really hot, and so my cages the grass that I had growing in my Madagascar giant enclosure kind of bit the bullet with this heat. But
Okay.
I have a lot of live grass growing in some of my enclosures, which is cool because you witness the snakes, and maybe it's mental stimulation, maybe I'm humanizing it a little bit, but they seem to enjoy it. Um,
Okay.
they enjoy the live plants, or just the stuff to explore, whether it be leaf litter or a new log, um, just different scents.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah, and it's something I've talked about on here. Eventually I definitely love to move some species to caging, the rhinos being one of them for sure. Because I'd love to see those guys, in a beautiful naturalistic setup, cruising around. It's all I hear. I mean, the Ganyasoma just seem to do so well in those style of enclosures and respond well to the lighting and all that stuff. So, if I'm going to do it for anything, it's probably going to be those guys first. Yeah. All right. Very cool. Yeah, so diving into some other topics, and like I said, you had mentioned that you don't have any non-colubrid species, right? Or is there anything else you wanted to highlight on that we didn't particularly mention species wise?
Um, mentioned pretty much everything. I mean, I keep barrens and the Madagascar cat-eyed and African shovel nose, beaked snakes, uh, African files, mostly African animals other than my barrens.
Okay.
But yeah, it's all pretty much the diurnal. Uh, really visually oriented species.
Cool.
In addition to the milks.
Awesome. Yeah, it almost seems like it is a lot more all the African stuff. It almost seems like the Persinum almost don't fit in. The only
No,
ones from that side of the world. Oh, I mean Africa is on the
barons. Yeah.
yeah, but cool. All right. Now I also wanted to talk about like vending and reptile shows in general on the West Coast because I've seen you've at least been to, I believe you vended like the super shows over
Um,
there.
so a couple weeks ago, I went to the Super Show,
Okay.
and then I did share a booth with Chris Sharp and Roy Blodgett in January's.
Okay. Yes.
And it depends. I'm not a big vendor. I sell a lot of my stuff online, and then don't have the availability to have a whole booth. Um,
Okay.
and I can't always commit to the dates. I'm a single mom. I've got kids. So
Okay.
it's like when can I get away to
Yeah.
dedicate an entire weekend? Um, but
But hey, if you're selling your stuff online, props to you. That's awesome.
yeah, and most of the time, by the time the shows rolled around, I'm like, well, I don't have anything, or oh, I sell it online anyways. Um, so I don't have to really dedicate an entire booth to myself. I'll split a booth
Yep.
with someone. But I like going to the shows as the networking, hanging out with my friends. The community that has turned to best friends and family now
Yeah.
over the years, and so that's that's why I go. Is mostly just for making the connections, seeing the friends, doing the dinners and the auctions afterward. Not so much putting my snakes on a table.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny you say that because I'm in the same boat, especially kind of getting my collection and breeding program up to speed finally. I was able to vend a couple shows at the end of last year. I didn't really have a whole lot of animals, and then when I slowly ran out, like I feel like it sucks that I can't do shows anymore, whether or not I sold stuff. Like, it's just fun. And I like showing people and educating people. And, for all the snakes I didn't sell at those shows, I got a couple like post show sales. So the networking is still there. It's still definitely a factor. And teaching someone something that they didn't know before, it makes it all worth it to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to say, like, with my timing, it's like, okay, well, most of the shows that are happening right now, I don't have babies available. I probably won't have anything hatched until September, and then you got to get meals into them, and then that pushes into winter, and then temperatures are cooler, and so it's kind of that
Yeah.
balancing act of, am I going to have something when the shows are happening?
Yep. Yeah. Definitely. It's tough, especially when timing's a factor like that, because then it's like, yeah, because I missed a slew of shows that were going on down here. And even for Colubrid Fest, which we can talk about right now, but like I might just have enough Texas rats to bring for a full display if I do that. And I have a clutch hatching like in the next few weeks, and it's like, okay, get those 6 meals in them so that they're ready.
Yeah, that's
At
gonna be the
least.
same thing. Is like I am vending. I'm gonna be at Colubrid Fest for all 3 days. Um, but and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna vend. Just I won't have much available.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'll have a few clutches of Hondurans, and some other things here or there. But it won't be everything I have available or going to be produced will be ready by then. But it's like, okay, if I sell a few things enough to like help out with my airfare, flying and hotel and everything else, then it'll make it worth it. And just the networking and seeing the people that I talk to almost on a daily basis, being able to see them face to face, say, I finally met you after years.
Yeah.
That's where it's at for me is, they're my village. So it's like, I want to
Yep.
be able to see them when I can. And I'm so excited for Colubrid Fest. And I'm coming from the West Coast, and I'm like, okay, who else over here can go? Like, let's put this together. Let's get more people there. It's a first year thing, but it's Clint and Zach are awesome. Um,
Yeah.
I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to meeting them. Definitely looking forward to meeting you. I think I'll be able to get a little more taste of Colubrid people this time around at Daytona. Like I was there the past 2 years, but I didn't know the people that I know now, especially from like doing this show and getting a little more connected in the Colubrid community. So I'm excited to get that kind of Daytona shot, and then like a month later, then it's all the people at Colubrid Fest. So it's gonna be like a double whammy in a month.
That's what I was like, okay, I'm gonna do Tinley. I'm gonna go to Tinley because I want to meet all these people. And then they announced the Colubrid Fest. I'm like, I can't do both. So I guess I'm going to Colubrid Fest instead.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait until the following year. Because I've never been to Tinley. I would have loved to do Daytona. I went to Daytona in 2010, and that was awesome.
Okay.
That was a while ago, but I flew out there for
Yeah.
that, and that was fun. Haven't been back, but life.
I'm lucky that it's in my backyard. It's like a 3.5 hour drive for me, so it's easy. Colubrid Fest is definitely the challenging trip for me, and it's the farthest I'm traveling for a show. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm like I have Pomona, the Super Show. That's twice a year, but that's still like a 9 hour drive for me.
Well,
Even though it's
I was gonna say, yeah,
I'm
where
in
are you
Northern
at?
California,
Okay.
So I'm like 2.5 hours north of San Francisco, uh,
Okay.
and then Super Show is in LA, so it's way down south. I still go to
Yeah.
it, but it's not right there.
Okay. Gotcha. And then sticking on Colubrid Fest, and this also probably leads into the next topic. But what are you probably? We'll get some pre thoughts about the show. What are you most excited to see, hear, or do at the show? What are like your expectations?
Um, Not bringing home anything. No. um,
That's
no,
gonna be a tough one.
yeah, yeah. I'm most excited for the panels and the presentation. I am going to be speaking, but I love the the learning aspect of it, the educational part. So it's like shows are great, but you can go to a show anytime, pretty much.
Yeah.
So hearing the people talk, that's where it's at for me. So that's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to that aspect too, because I've never been to any sort of reptile symposium type conference like this is. So I'm definitely interested to hear the talks and just the overall get together and then just the vending experience, whether we were talking about it before. I don't know how many vendors are 100% locked in, whether it's a smaller show or it's a big packed show and there's a ton of people there. I mean, whatever it is, I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then, you told me beforehand what you are going to be talking about at the show, but I wanted to dive into that here if we can, at least just a little bit, because something we see often, it's a very male dominated hobby. And you happen to be a successful woman in the hobby. So I kind of wanted to get your perspective of, what it's like to be in your position and how it's been through the years and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I think I work with what I like, and I don't work with what's in or popular. And so with that being said, the stuff that I've been working with for so long, I've kind of been able to build the name that I have just because I've got the years behind it.
Right.
Um, and I've been doing this for a while. But I like to represent the educational part of it. Of I'll share what I do. I'll type up a document of I did it at this this temperature in this many days, and trying to put that knowledge out there. I'm not going to gatekeep what's working for me, because the species that I am trying to work with, I want other people to work with as well. I want to establish the captive breeding populations. Um, I'm not. It is a source of income for me, but I'm not doing it to strike it rich. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm not gonna like keep my secrets. I want to share that. So with that, I am talking with people. I'm discussing things, and it's like there's even things that I don't know about. It's like I've been like, hey, you keep this species. What works for you? And it's like I like to know everything there is to know about whatever I can find out first. I tend to second guess myself a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe of like, oh, like how I went into panic of the Prasinum eggs. I'm like, I know what I know, and everyone's like, well, you're gonna find out. It's like, yeah, but I still want to know what you have to say. Um,
Right.
I'm going off topic, but uh, it's a lot of talking to people and trying to get the knowledge, um, has spread the awareness, put my name out there. Um, and yeah, like I mentioned to you before, being a woman in a male dominated uh, industry, of there has been several times where guys have been like, hey, maybe send some pictures, I'll give you a good deal. I'm like, no, one, that's not what I'm about. You can't win me over that way. I'm in it for the species and the knowledge of it, not the popularity contest, not to get ahead like that.
Yeah.
The
And
reputation
that's
that
just
I have,
terrible. I
yeah,
mean,
the reputation that I have, or that I want in this community, is I want their respect. You know,
yep.
I don't want to be
100%.
just another girl who's hanging out in front of a camera showing off my snakes. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm about.
Right. For sure. Yeah. I feel like, and even when you say just like getting your respect in general, like it takes a lot to do that as anyone in this hobby to really generate like real respect, and probably even harder so as a woman. Because even I feel that way sometimes about being young, because like I'm 23 and I'm this kid who talks on a freaking podcast once a week. It's like, what the hell does he know? Which is not everything. It's not all that much, but that's why I'm talking to you guys, because I'm asking you guys questions. So, but
And
yeah.
I think that, like, with it being such a male dominated industry, it's like I can't tell you how many times I get messages that's like, "Hello, sir. I'll try again." But it's like they just assume that
Yeah.
that I'm a dude. I'm like, no, there's a few of us women out there.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Awesome. Um Now kind of just going, let's see. Yeah, so just in general, I guess going to some wrap up topics. What would you say has kept your focus so high on a species like Honduran milk snakes? Because obviously that's the species that's dominated your collection the most, one of the ones you've kept the longest. What's kept like your one track mind on those guys to keep working and striving towards new things there?
Uh, I'm attracted to them. I like a red and black snake. Um,
Okay.
and so it's personal preference of the what the snake looks like. I find it attractive. I like working with it. They're easy. Like I said, I don't like being bit. So they're not. I don't get intimidated by them. Like I'm a baby with my Barons. She scares me. But so it's like I'm comfortable with them. Um, and it's when they hatch, it's like they're always a little different. Um,
Yeah.
and even just the most subtle differences, I can pick them out. And so it's like when they hatch, it's Christmas morning. It's like, what am I gonna get? Especially with working with the different lineages and the morphs. they're all a little different, and even same pairings, but year to year they differ a little bit. And so that kind of what keeps me going. There has been many times over the last decade or so where I'm like, why am I doing this? Like when it comes time to clean tubs, I'm like, why do I have this many? But then I get eggs and then I get babies. And I'm like, this is why I'm doing it. It's so exciting. It's like that, that adrenaline rush of babies are hatching. What are they gonna look like? And so that keeps me going.
Right. Very cool. Um, and then, as we see in the reptile hobby, we've seen over the last couple years and things going on in the world and stuff, with things with the economy and stuff. But like, what's a big motivator for what keeps you going with reptiles in general? Because obviously, we've seen some like negativities in the hobby, a lot of people getting out over the last few years, or at least I've seen it a lot. But like, what keeps your motivation going, to keep doing what you're doing in general with your entire collection?
Um, they make me happy.
Yeah.
They pay my bills. But I did take a backseat between like 2020 and maybe like 2 years ago. Um, of I went through a divorce and I kind of had to downsize. I downsized on a lot of things
Okay.
and kept primarily my main focus on the Hondurans. And I guess that's when the industry was booming. That's when the market was booming through COVID. And I'm like, I missed out on that. Um, but a lot of people, especially in the Hondurans, there's some guys that have been working with it for, longer than me. And like the last year or two, they sold off all their breeders. And I'm like, nope, I'm done. They either get burnt out or they can't move their animals. And so it kind of opened up like a little gap. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fill the gap. So it's like
Okay.
I bought a couple of their animals and was like, okay, I'm gonna put more focus on what I'm doing, and start more of an online, presence of, before I think I only made my Instagram like in January. I've
Yeah.
always, hanging out in the Facebook groups and Facebook land and on fauna classifieds and morph market. But I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to kick it up a notch, I got to like really get in it and post those pictures. And I'm not super tech savvy. I don't have a fancy camera. Everything's on my phone. Um, so I was like, okay, I gotta figure out how I can make more of a presence to just further say, hey, I'm here. These are my animals. This is what I'm working on. And it's been received really well.
Awesome. Awesome. And then, kind of before we get into the last few questions, kind of going back, because, when there's an opportunity to talk kind of like business stuff, I definitely like talking about it because some people do see this, or like they're able to get more of a business out of it. And some others just like don't really care as much. But like, um, talk through that because we've seen with colubrids, I feel like the popularity is growing, but also some of the prices have kind of come down, but they've also stayed the same. They've stayed stable compared to some other things like ball pythons and crested geckos. So how have you fared seeing the way the market has gone over the last few years for at least the stuff you're selling?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started keeping Hondurans, babies were like $75. Now what was $75 is like 150, 200. Uh,
Yeah.
but with everything, it goes up, it comes down, it goes back up, it comes down. Um, and I think like I do wholesale quite a bit.
Okay.
Like the lower end things, like a lot of my albinos or just my hypos, they'll go overseas, which has worked out great for me. Um,
Yeah.
other than occasionally I'll get someone who I want all your females. I'm like, no. but um, but yeah, I think the market, it I see colubrids coming back up as other things kind of teeter down a little bit. Uh, And I, knock on wood again, I've not had an issue moving my animals. Again, it could be just because I have put the time in, and I try and have something a little different or focus on the specific lineages or projects, um, rather than just run of the mill whatever
Right.
whatever's out there. I do have a little bit of everything just because you have to cater to the people that want a Honduran but don't want to spend the big bucks for the big special things. Um, but I haven't had much issue moving things at all.
Okay. Awesome. Let's see. And then yeah, so kind of going into my last couple wrap up questions. So what does the future for infrared reptiles look like for you? Let's say the next like 3 to 5 years or so. Any species of the future, any foreseeable plans that are on the table? What's on the horizon?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of riding along. I would love to successfully establish some species of, keep the generations going. I'm, working on getting those F1s. I would love to get the F2s and the F3s, and that takes time and figuring things out. And especially because I do work with a lot of the unusual wild caught animals, it's like you just got to focus on getting your F1 animals. Like you get your wild caughts, you treat them, you do what you can, but you got to get your F1s, and then you can go from there. Because a lot of the times you will lose the wild caught, and so it's like, and it's just kind of part of it. It's like things
Okay.
can be great and then they're not. So I would love to have the time behind of getting the multiple generations from a wild caught and then establishing the captive breeding program, of being able to offer those species that come in and don't survive or don't thrive long term in collections.
Gotcha. No, that's awesome. I think that's a great goal. And hopefully, like we said, you're able to see some success soon
Thank you.
on those. Yeah. Cool. And then like my last kind of question to everyone um is what is your kind of elevator pitch? And let's narrow it down to Hondurans. What's your elevator pitch? Maybe it's a first time colubrid owner, maybe it's a first time snake keeper in general. Why Honduran milk snakes? Why should that be the snake of choice?
They're easy. Um, you really don't have an issue getting them fed. Babies come out eating. I mean, I've got babies that'll eat before they even have that first shed. Um, they're easy to start, and they're a manageable size to where the babies are big to where you don't have to worry about, "Oh, what am I going to feed this thing?" Pinky will do.
Yeah.
Sometimes the babies will come out big enough to eat a fuzzy, um, and their husbandry is simple. You just got to get past the pooping stage. Babies,
The
they poop
squirmy
plenty.
stage.
Yeah, and the flighty, yeah, I call them, flighty little poop slingers, poop shooters. But yeah, if that doesn't phase you, just ride it out. They'll calm down with age. Uh, they're not a bitey species, so a lot of people for kids, they're like, oh, they're bright colors, they're beautiful. I'm like, yeah, just get through the baby stage, and then they're fine. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're beautiful. They're super beautiful.
100%. Yeah. Awesome. Any final words before we kind of wrap up? Anything else you wanted to touch on?
I think we covered pretty much everything.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you doing this. The pre-recorded option is cool too. So any future guests I ask on, there's definitely an option though. I like having the live chat here, but it's all good.
Yeah,
Um,
sad we missed out, but I just
y-
didn't have much faith in my internet connection.
No, it's all good, and it actually lasted very well on this. So this is going to be a very seamless recording that hopefully has no issues transferring over to YouTube and the podcasting platform. So we're all good there. All right, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. I appreciate you having. Yeah, I appreciate having you on, and yeah, I'm just gonna wrap up, do the outro, and we'll talk after I stop this.
Okay.
So yeah, guys, thank you so much for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. This was episode number 32 with Kayla Martin of Infrared Reptiles. Guys, as usual, check out the link in the description to get the link to Kayla's Instagram. Go follow her on social media. Then go follow me on social media on Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe on YouTube. Again, chasing 1,000 subscribers. We're getting closer by the week. And let's see. Yeah, the first link in the description goes to the Meteor Serpents Patreon. If you're interested in supporting me a little bit, saying thanks for the show, whatever it may be, getting exclusive content behind the scenes, group chat of fellow colubrid lovers, that's the place for you. So yeah, the guys, thank you so much for joining again. This was episode number 32 of the Colubrid Corruption Podcast. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.